Ocean Ocean with a feature.
Boy, crikey. So this comic is all about a man and his dog. And the dog was running around about the outback when he found a snake and he said, oh, blimey, you stick my thumb up its bum. And the guy came and said, you shouldn't do that because it makes him real angry like. The dog said, oh, I'm going to do it anyway. And so he did it. And then he got bit.
Hello, this is the Quackcast. I'm Ozone Ocean, and we're going to be talking about stuff. About, I don't know, good and evil, gods and that kind of stuff. Legends, not just gods, but legends. So guys, this is Quackcast number 349. I have Baines with me. Baines,
hello.
God of the Forge and making intricate devices and weapons. So he would be. It starts with H. I know it. What's the name?
You gave me Hephaestus?
That's it.
Yes.
Herpes.
How curious.
That's it. Hephaestus. Or it could be Thor as well. Same thing. Baines is Thor. He's got the beard. Pitface. Pitface is, let's see, obviously Athena. Come on.
That's what I was thinking.
We all
Tense.
know it.
I couldn't be
I
Aries.
think Tant is a much better Athena. She's
Tance is Artemis.
much more.
Oh no. Maybe Pit is Artemis and Tance is Athena. I reckon Tance is Athena because she's all about justice.
I want to be Dionysus or Pan because he's got a big dick.
That wouldn't be Pan. That would be Priapus.
Yes.
I think. I'm the fucking classics major. Don't you fucking correct me.
Pit is a fantastic Priapus because, there's no one bigger. No one bigger.
That's right. I am the biggest dick.
She's a huge dick.
The Robin. Black out the sun.
that also was a curse, by the way. It's a good thing.
Yeah, I get to. Yeah.
That sounds like jealousy.
I've got to assign myself a god. I'm Poseidon because I'm a jealous dick. And I'm jealous of anyone who criticizes my intelligence and whatever. And if you kill my Cyclops, well, then you bug it. So keep your hands off my one-eyed monster. All right.
We've really been penetrating these myths.
Oh, God. All right, so before we get into that, I got to mention the featured comic. And, okay, here is... let's see, who's got the feature? Okay, it's Ozone Ocean with a feature. Take it away, Ozone Ocean. Hello, I'm Ozone Ocean, and my feature for the week was Constellation Chronicle. Wainwright and Marcel are investigating a derelict space hulk drifting in the void when things start to get eerie. Marcel has a terrifying vision. Is it a trick of the mind, madness, or something more sinister? A vision of things to come, perhaps. This is a thriller, mystery, sci-fi, suspenseful space story with more than a little trace of Cthulhu and cosmic horror. The Constellation Chronicle is a pretty, fully coloured graphic novel comic with fully digital art. It updates very frequently, so be sure to follow along with its progress. There's not too much so far, just a chapter in the beginning of the next, but we're slowly getting into the mystery that is Constellation Chronicle, into the galactic sci-fi mystery, because all this occurs in deep space, at least it has so far, with some very interesting things. We don't see many comics of this style on Drunk Duck. I can't really remember any. Well, we do have sci-fi comics, but not sci-fi mystery, sort of that bring you in mind of Alien or Event Horizon or something like that, or Solaris maybe, and that's sort of what you're getting here. So anyway, I hope you enjoy The Constellation Chronicle by Emevsa. Rated M. Read it. And that was our feature. Thank you for that. It was an ocean. Me. Okay, next up we have the featured music, which is given to us by Gumwallis. And the featured music was Puppets and Strings. Puppets and Strings, which is a pretty cool comic by Emma Clare. Rated T. Yeah, go Emma. Oh, a person with a proper name. That's rare on Drunk Duck. This music is a sepulchral, hollow, somber theme, yet also grand and pretentious, stirring, melancholic, yet epic. So, take it away, Gumwallis. Was our music by Gumwallis. Thank you for that, Gumwallis. That was very somber and portentous and
Sepulchral.
sepulchral.
People have no reference for what we were talking about, so they're going to think you just had a stroke on air.
Oh, shut up about my one-eyed God.
So all of us are on the inside and all the audience is on the outside. And we're basically being rude right now to the audience.
It's all in-jokes with us. Far too up ourselves. That's our problem. Okay, so we're talking about, this whole idea was inspired by me sort of ruminating on, this new movie, Thor Ragnarok that's come out, and which is, of course, based on the Norse religions, very loosely, very, very loosely, but it is. And the character they picked as the bad guy in this particular film was Hel, who is Loki's daughter, but basically she just rules over Helheim, where all the dead people go. It's basically the same as, Hades' realm in Greek myth, exactly the same kind of things. She's not good or bad, she's neutral, she just rules over that area, and the dead people are sort of neutral. It's not good or bad. But the thing that interests me was the decision of these pop cultural people, in the film or also in the comics, to pick her as a bad guy. Just because she's a sort of a goddess of associated with death, they make her a bad guy, even though in Norse myth she's not at all. She's got nothing to do with that kind of thing. And that just struck me. I was thinking about other things, so there's a Disney version of Hercules where Hades is the bad guy. He's Mr. Evil because he's associated with death, whereas in Greek myth he's not. It's all the other gods who are bad, Zeus and everybody else, Ares, all that kind of stuff. Even Dionysus and Apollo, they're all massive dicks. But, they picked Hades because my idea was that it fits in with the whole, what we know of Christianity. So that's not Christianity as in, the gods and the religious sense, but our pop cultural view of Christianity. So we've got good and evil in there. We have God being good, Jesus and angels and stuff like that, versus the devil and the demons. And that's a strong idea in pop culture. And in everything, it's easy to understand when you have a villain and all that kind of stuff. But we look back at Christianity, and the devil has come to be associated with ruling over hell and ruling over the souls of the damned who go down there, whereas all the good guys go up to heaven. And when we interpret other religions and other legends, we look at that through the same lens. So we say, okay, this is the god of death, he must be evil. So like Set, I think is the god in Egyptian religion. It's the same kind of thing, he's super bad. Maybe he's a bit bad, I can't remember, I think so, but he's not that really bad. And then in Hindu religion as well, you say Shiva is the evil person, and we do it for all religions. We interpret all, not so much religions, I'd say legends is the thing, and mythologies. I'm not sort of putting those religions down and saying they're not the status of religions, but we don't really think of them as religions. We think of them as mythologies and stories more than anything else. Anyway, so that's my blabbing on, sort of introducing it. So, Tance, I didn't mean to force you out of the conversation there. What were you going to say?
You were monologuing.
Exactly, I was.
But yeah, I think that considering that this is pop culture more than actual representations of the different mythologies or religions, or call them what you like, that the fact that a representation of death is depicted as evil, it reflects much more on our current culture, that death is the ultimate evil, which is not necessarily what was the culture earlier or in different cultures, where death has different connotations. For example, in ancient Greek religion, you had like the realm of Hades had the Elysian fields, and then there was this realm of shadows, and then there was an even lower place of oblivion.
Yeah.
So you had 3 tiers of posthumous existence, let's say.
Like posthumous.
Yeah. So, the biggest
posthumous.
problem that people the biggest problem that people had to deal with and grapple with was whether they were remembered by those that were alive.
Yeah.
So you became the damnation, quote unquote, was mostly not being remembered and just, dragging around as a shade, basically doing nothing and thinking about what you were not doing because you were dead. So, whereas in Elysian fields, you had a better deal. So it was like a nice garden.
Yeah.
And that was reserved for heroes that were famous, that did amazing things, that changed in some way, and so on and so forth. So you can say, ancient Greeks in general, I guess, are very much all about, will I be remembered after I'm dead? Because that is how I sort of remain alive.
Yeah.
So that would be damnation back then. So Hades wasn't the devil. He was just the one who assorted you and assigned you to these 3 tiers. Where you lived.
And I think hell... I'll go on, sorry.
No, please, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think hell had a similar role because she looked after all the poor people who'd just, been shuffled off down, all the farmers and things like that who weren't glorious enough to get into Valhalla, carried away by the Valkyries. So she looked after just all the rest of the people. So it wasn't a punishment. It was just somewhere where people who weren't glorious enough to be remembered in the glorious halls ended up. So it was just exactly the same kind of thing as Greek myth, really, which is an interesting thing. And she's called Hel, which is always seemed to be that
Could be where the thing,
strange.
Where her name, maybe her name is the root of Hel. Maybe, could be.
Well, I
don't know.
yeah, the religion really started around 600 AD, so quite a bit after. After very, very long time after all the ancient Greeks came up with their pantheon, so it probably was influenced by the cultures that came before in some kind of way. And plus, it was written down by people who were very solidly within the Christian era. So who knows how they decided to change names to fit in with their understanding. So, yeah.
That could be.
Might be more than coincidence.
Now that I'm thinking about it, though, and please stop me if I keep talking too long. Even in cultures that death is a stage or a situation that isn't necessarily damnation, or there is a state where you get, as a soul, you get judged, ascend to some other existence that is much better than whatever it is you have right now, or you get discarded. Thinking like is more in Hinduism, or all the religions that involve reincarnation. You have you have two states that exist where you don't get reincarnated again. The one where you ascend to be with the divine, whatever that divine is described as, and the one where you get destroyed, basically, and you don't exist, cannot get reincarnated again. So, and this happens after a series of reincarnations, whether either you progress to ascension or you become progressively worse and worse, or you do something really terrible in one life and then that's it. Chances. So you do have the element of being judged eventually, but not necessarily connected with death itself.
Yeah, that's true.
There is some point in existence where you get judged by the divine, whatever divine that is.
Yeah, it's with your spirit, it's after you've already died and your spirit's been floating around for a while, and it's more an administrative.
Yeah.
You're going through student services and whatever. They're deciding whether you're going to get that grant or that place. That'd be an interesting way to interpret heaven, wouldn't it?
I've seen that done in pop culture, in some literature and stuff like that. Literature, like say a Piers Anthony book or 3, where I think maybe it was On a Pale Horse, where the afterlife is kind of addressed. People who end up in purgatory, it's just endless paperwork. It's kind of just like literally like centuries of paperwork that have to be done, or lines that you have to wait in. And it's, it's like, taken to be that kind of thing. And none of it necessarily evil or about, hell is about punishment in that world, I think. Yeah. I wonder if we'll all be just registering for university classes in the afterlife.
Oh God, that would be
kind of strange to think about. Exactly.
There's nothing worse than progressing through that. Oh my God. Yeah, that's hell on earth. Well, let's see. There's also in Christianity there exists that as well. In pop culture, at least, you go in only jokes as well. You go up to the pearly gates and you get judged by Michael, me, waiting at the pearly gates, and I decide whether you get to ascend or whether you get chucked down below, and that's just how it is. So bribes are welcome. But yeah, that's in Christianity as well, definitely. It's St. Paul, I'm being told, not Michael. Well, you should correct me, Jesus, before I make a fool of myself, Tans. Look what I've done. Well, you're right. It's a St. Paul, because Michael would be like, he's me. I'm far too important for that kind of thing. I'm an angel.
Yes,
Michael,
the archangel.
Michael is the one that cut down the devil.
That's right.
Much more impressive.
The archangel, man.
Yeah, Michael's pretty cool. I have to say that. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you didn't know that already. Oh, well. But Ozone Ocean is the name I go by here. And I should shut up. All right, let's get back onto the story. What are we talking about? Okay, interpreting gods as goodies or baddies. How do we? I think my whole point of it was that it's influenced by our current understanding of things like that. So we look back and we think, you're the goodies and you're the baddies based on what we, our prejudices or our current culture. But it's not only for gods, it's for heroes as well. And, other mythologies and legends, we assign goodies and baddies. Let's say, I was thinking of the Legend of the 300, the Spartans and all that kind of stuff. But that is pretty skewed to begin with. I mean, you read the original poem, and it is very, very skewed. The Greeks they had their propaganda kind of stuff going. Xerxes was a super bad guy, or Darius, whoever he was. He was bad. Well, whatever, the interpretation of the story. I don't know where it came from. A vase or something. I don't know.
I don't even know what the fuck you're talking about, that dude. Jesus Christ!
Yeah.
Thermopylae.
I was not saying anything right now. I was told
wherever it's from. I've read stuff, and it's meant to be authoritative. And
it was enough to lead Spiridon Myranatos to the site where it likely occurred, and give us archaeological evidence that it existed in the first place. So it was Herodotus, by the way, the histories.
Okay. Anyway, so it's meant to be a real story. It's meant to be something that's real.
But this is why I need to go back on mute.
No, that's good. You contribute. You correct me. Jesus Christ.
You pushed my nerd rage, dude. You did it. You jabbed that button with your finger as hard as you fucking could. So
purposefully.
I'm sorry.
I'm glad it worked.
I'm sorry, Captain. My captain. And continue.
Jeez, you guys, you meant to do that. Anyway, so the thing is, that's pretty skewed to begin with. So when we have films of that, we portray the Persians as. What's the Persians? I'm not getting that wrong, am I? We play them as the super duper bad. It's bloody 25 years since I studied this. Come on. We portray them as the super bad guys, and that's fine because that's how they were in the story, and that's how the Greeks believed them to be. So I can't really use that as
no, it wasn't.
Yeah? Okay, tell me.
No. Yes, if you read the fucking histories, it doesn't sit there and say that the Persians were bad guys. It actually sometimes even legitimizes why they do some of the shit that they do.
Okay.
That's one of the interesting things about Herodotus, is he doesn't paint black and white. Some of the Greeks are bad guys, and some of the Persians are trying to do what's best and what's right.
Well, that's what I want to know. Tell me. Tell us.
Yeah. So that's what I was telling you. But see, this is good because this feeds actually into your point that you were trying to make, because you were kind of just whitewashing it all right now and saying that, oh, that's what the source material was doing anyway, which goes against the point that you were trying to make before, which is that the interpretations of these characters nowadays makes things black and white when their source material didn't. So you were right in that aspect, but you just were backing yourself up in an incorrect and poorly done way. So I'm helping you.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
I also wanted to say that, especially the 300 mythos, let's put it like this, has had so many iterations, especially like the movies aren't based on the histories. They are based on a comic book, and the comic book wasn't seeking to represent what Herodotus was representing, who at least as far as I remember from reading it both in school and then for blah blah whatever. He what he wanted to do was to show a legitimate superpower that didn't win, and the reasons why they didn't win, without necessarily painting this superpower in like the devil's colors. There was an explanation started and why the Athenians went to support certain cities in Asia Minor and the politics behind that and how things escalated and a whole range of things. Aside, the gossip that I personally enjoyed a lot, that he includes. However, what he does is basically show, what he wanted to do was show that unity and strategy could win over raw
numbers.
Yeah, strength in numbers, basically. And also quality, because when you have such a dissonance in technology, especially when it comes to weapons, numbers won't. So you see, but however, the movies in 300, they had a different agenda, and they were referring as that are modern, not to the historical forces of then, back then. I recall this article that said that the way that the Spartans are being presented and everything is more of a reference to American troops.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that is accurate, because to be honest, I didn't busy myself to analyze it this deeply. But there are analyses like this.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah, very much so. There's like, the forces, it's like a classical interpretation of West versus East. And that was one of
Greece isn't exactly West.
Well, Greece is the representative of the cradle of Western civilization, pretty much. I mean, it is the,
is neither East nor West. We are sitting right in the middle.
Oh, I know. I mean,
it's not your fault, though. We are.
Yeah.
To be considered West a lot, so that's not your fault.
Traditionally, Greece was like the Eastern Orthodox and the Eastern mysterious version of Christianity and all that kind of stuff. But classically, Greece is sort of thought of as the cradle of Western civilization, the far edge, of Western civilization against where Turkey is, and then the Middle East.
That's true.
So yeah, that's the kind of thing. So when you've got that in the lens of the modern world, and when we have the idea of East against West, Israel against Palestine, Israel against Iran, that's the big thing, isn't it? All that kind of stuff. America against Afghanistan, blah 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 blah. It's an analog of that kind of thing. You have the good guys against the bad guys. So I think when the story you're referring to, the article, was probably sort of thinking about it in that way. So we're all right. To reiterate the subjects, we're talking about the way we interpret myths and legends and we assign a bad guy according to our own modern preferences and modern prejudices. Even though the bad guys might and the good guys might not necessarily have been the good guys and the bad guys, we assign them based on the way we think about things in a modern world. So yeah, that's the whole kind of thing. And the original example, making Hel the bad guy in Thor Ragnarok, and say the Hercules version of a Disney version of Hercules, where Hades is the bad guy because he's the god of death, that kind of thing. In Xena,
yeah, we never see Hercules in that version go crazy and kill his sons or anything like that, do we?
No, he's too good for that. He's a good guy.
And also, no reference to Hera being the actual villain in the origin story of Hercules, because she is the one that is trying to kill him as a revenge, because he is her husband's bastard. So
he's yes. As a matter of fact, Hercules' actual name was Heracles, which I'm used to calling him, and I try not to right now because I sound pretentious because you're all saying Hercules. I'd be like, Heracles, you'd be like, shut the fuck up. But anyway, Heracles was named that as in an attempt to appease Hera, which didn't work.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, because Hera is portrayed, and this is another thing. Hera is always portrayed as a very spiteful, jealous, petty, quote-unquote, wife. But if you consider her position, she's supposed to be like the queen of all the gods, and she is constantly being done by, and not very cleverly, by her husband, who fills the world with an army of bastards, while her kids usually have some sort of problem. Like they are not exactly the best out there, except like or she hates them and
bandy legs
them up like yes, like poor Hephaestus. He is lame because his mother didn't like the way he looked when he was born, ugly, and threw him off. Like, so you have like Hera is sort of understandably from her point of view vengeful and always angry. Most of the myths you will find that she plays the role of the villain.
Yeah.
She always chases after the hero and his mom.
Right.
So,
okay.
She would be.
Which one got cast out for being lame or whatever?
For being too ugly. Hephaestus,
yes.
The one.
I thought so.
And when he returned, and that's a fun story, because he was thrown off the mountain. He broke his hip or something, and it never set properly, so he limped. And then, but he was saved by some sea goddesses. And
just the depth of Oz's calling beastess.
And then he became this amazing craftsman. Anything.
That's right.
So he makes this beautiful throne. All right, and he goes back up in Olympus and says, "Mom, you know what? let's forget everything. Let bygones be bygones. Here is a beautiful chair for you. Please have a seat. And here being the idiot that says, she sits down on that throne. And of course, she cannot get up again because it is this magical bondage thing. And
Right.
and there was no god, like even Ares or anyone else, who can get her out of the throne. And they all have to beg, let her go.
Right.
And that's how he made a comeback in Olympus.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Yeah, there you go.
Yes, don't sit in any chairs that Baines offers you because
Exactly. Be careful.
Exactly.
I changed that to Thor Baines, so you know.
It's too late.
Don't be Thor Baines. Don't be Thor.
I'll try not to be Thor about it.
Oh, it's hilarious. Didn't he also make a big net that he caught up Aphrodite?
Yeah, that was to catch his wife with eyes. Yes.
Yes, he's the faithful god, right? He marries Aphrodite,
Mm-hmm.
goddess of beauty,
He caught
and
Aphrodite
he's the only one who's faithful, and she cheats on him with the bad boy,
and Ares, I think,
Ain't
With
that
Ares,
always the way it
yeah.
goes?
with the god of war. Yeah.
in a big
Yeah, love
golden
and war
net.
go together. Or sex and war, by the way.
So he's
Sexy war.
sexy war and bondage.
In a way, though, he brought it on himself. The cheating.
Workaholic, right?
Aphrodite. No, because he married. In order to let his mom go from the chair, he said, okay, but give me Aphrodite to marry. Aphrodite, of course, didn't want him,
Right.
but she married him anyway. So, of course, he was in for getting,
There you go.
horns.
Yes. None of them are good people, I guess. Then.
Yeah.
So all of this goes to show us that, at least in the Greek pantheon, the gods weren't necessarily black and white as we tend to
Yeah,
think.
absolutely.
And I love that aspect.
So,
Go on, Pitt.
yeah, I do too. And I was going to say, so can we talk about maybe comic-wise, like, why is this in comics such a thing? I mean, does it need to be dumbed down sometimes, or do you think it's possible to have a story with such multi-dimensional supposed bad guys?
I would say when they first started sorry, Ozzy.
No.
When they first started introducing these godlike characters, maybe they did before early Marvel. I don't know, but in the 60s, it was very black and white. It was very heroes versus villains. So they want to do that, but they also wanted to introduce these compelling characters. And there's these god characters have a lot of power, just the idea of them, and they're sort of universal, sort of human, kind of either well regarded or just have a gravitas to them type characters and stories. I think more nuanced or more complex stories are told in comics now, as opposed to when these characters were first introduced.
Yep. That's a good point.
Yeah.
So now, if they did a kind of story, then you could have a more realistic depiction of the gods, perhaps. Let's just talk about, say, Norse religion. The bad guy in there is often Odin himself, the king of the gods. He's probably one of the worst guys in a lot of it. There's some Eddas that say, where there's some kind of dialogue, and he's being referred to as the father of evil, the father of lies, because what he does is typically he, because he's the god of war, well, he's the god of battle, Tyr is the god of war, but Odin's like in charge of everything. What he does is he influences both sides, and he says to the king, you know, oh, you should go and fight. You should go and you have this war. And then he goes to the other king and says, you know, oh, you should go and fight these guys now. They're coming to get you. And that's what he does. So he's known as the father of lies, the father of battle. So there can't be anything more evil than someone who starts wars, really, is.
Well,
and
they play with it in its pop cultural way. Sorry, I'll just interrupt for 1 second.
Yep.
In Thor Ragnarok, since we started with that, and that's a big movie of the moment, they do address that a bit. Like Odin's past, that was not what any of the other characters, what Thor or Loki or anyone else thought of him. He has this secret past that is pretty ugly and no one knew about, kind of thing.
Okay.
So,
all right. In what way?
Well, it's a spoiler, so I don't want to spoil it. But
spoil it.
I don't know if it's a spoiler that matters, but he has a history that was covered up from millennia ago with Hela. They worked together and they invaded other worlds, and Odin was a sort of a god of battle and conquest and ambitious. And then once they had a lot of power, he throttled it back. He wanted to go legit, like the Kennedys maybe or something. So then he wants to be the benevolent god. So he kind of, he puts away Hela, who's this Hel, this god of the underworld, casts her out at that point. So until, thousands of years later, when she comes back, is when we find out this ugly, spotty kind of history. But I'm interested in the Greek myth where the Thor fighting the Hulk. What's the basis for that one?
I have no. I can't even relate to. Well, I could relate that to Norse myth, but it would be sophistry and exercise in bullshit.
Yeah, a bit of a right.
Because Thor used to
you could
fight.
Have if you wanted to really, really stretch things out and bend them out of shape, you could say that Thor fighting Hulk, considering that they are these two basically demigod or godlike entities, that it could be like the War of the Titans, if you wanted to connect it to Greek myth, and or the
Titans are the ancestors of the gods, right?
Between the gods and the Titans. There you have it. So you have Thor being from the side of the gods, Hulk being a Titan, because then he's not exactly.
It's the same. So, it's exactly the same in Norse myth, actually, because the giants were the original gods or whatever, and exactly. all the giants are the original guys, and they sort of became sort of demons in relation to the Aesir and the Vanya, which are the Norse gods. But they were the original guys, and the whole of Asgard wasn't it originally formed by Odin and his brothers, sort of cutting up a gigantic giant and dividing his skull up and making that into the new.
Damn! Really?
I wouldn't. The only thing I remember is the Midgard serpent and that being connected to the end of the world, but I don't remember much about it, except that it goes around the earth and it compresses it and eats its own tail.
Right.
Yeah. Jormungandr, one of the two big dragons. The other is I can't remember. He nibbles the roots of the tree Ymir or whatever it's called. I can't remember that one's name. Something. The Norse people love these big symbols. I really think there's way too many parallels. I don't know with the Greek myths, because they've even got the three fates or whatever, who are very much like the Greek fates. Who weave everyone's fate on the loom, and that's exactly the same as Greek myth, isn't it? I'm pretty sure Greek myth has 3 fates who weave
Yeah.
people.
Greek myth does.
Yeah, and they also they are above the gods as well. Fates.
What's that?
Even the gods have to.
Yes.
But the fates in Greek mythology, because I don't know about Norse one. In Greek mythology, they are above even the gods. So
yeah,
the gods themselves would also need to go and beg and convince the three fates, and not they would have to convince Lachesis, who, if I'm not mistaken, who is the one tells the future and weaves the future.
Yeah.
So, if I remember right, with a bit of a question mark because I haven't checked. And she would need to be convinced to change the future, which happened extremely rarely. If basically she was forced, like super forced, with the actions of the humans. And that's the only thing that I really like about that mythos, in the sense that if you really, really, really are determined to do it, the ends of the earth to do it. But you can. So it's not exactly fatal.
Yeah, it's not set in stone. Well, that is very much the same in the Norse myth, as I was saying, and possibly because the educated people who originally interpreted it, Snorri Sturluson particularly, probably had a classical education and probably changed things to suit like we do today. We look at things through the lens of our current understanding. So he might have done that. And people have always done that originally. I'm thinking of, say, Julius Caesar when he first came to Britain, and there's writings of his, correct me if I'm wrong on this, about describing the myths and the legends of the people, or the religions of the people in the British Isles, and he talks about how they worship Jupiter, and Mars has his particular role, but he's not really talking about Jupiter as in the Roman gods. That's his name for Wotan, who is the particular god that they worshipped at that particular time. Wotan, who is the different version of Odin in a way. I don't know. Is it Wotan? No. I'm thinking a bit later.
Yes.
But anyway, so he described them. So he has Mars and Mercury and all this, and he's describing the gods on the British Isles with using his own Roman lens, just as we look at other religions in the modern day through a Christian lens, or through our pop culture lens. They did it the same way then. So it's interesting that trend is sort of universal. We always do that. Do you guys know anything more about that? I've not read much about it, but I found that fascinating, the way how he described those gods in that way. Awesome.
I wouldn't know about that.
I don't know anything about it. Sorry.
Oh, you guys just aren't educated enough.
Not at all.
I need to donk you with the scepter of knowing now. Prepared to be donked. Well, yeah, anyway. What else can we bring from this? This is the corpse of this Quackcast. Let's take it down to more
I wouldn't call it that.
Oh, go on.
Mythology is pretty... I think that actually it brought about pretty lively discussion. And of course, people do tend to match concepts to whatever makes sense to them in their own culture. So you would have this duality explained, like the clash between good and evil being between life and death. Culture that promotes how do you call it? materialism, that promotes materialism, and that beyond death there is nothing.
Yeah.
So what would be the ultimate evil? Would be the end of matter, also known as death.
Yeah.
So of course you have the god of death being
the ultimate evil.
Yes, and the devil basically.
Well, yeah, that's a good point as well, because I think the evil guy in some of the other Marvel stuff is Thanatos, which is of course another Greek death reference as well.
Right.
They just picked that name because it sounded, it's associated with death. They're not saying Thanatos is actually a god, but they did take that for that reason, because it has that association. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
And that is a particular... go on.
His brother is also Sleep, Hypnos. His actual name. And because Thanatos was the god, like transcendence, the act of from becoming dead from being alive, like this particular segue into post-death situations, whatever that was. So he had that took you to, other pictures. In the same way that sleep takes you to dreamland, but more permanent. He wasn't supposed to be. He was always portrayed as a very handsome young man.
Someone you welcome.
Which goes to show the difference. The difference between how death is regarded now, as opposed to when this particular deity was conceived. So.
Yeah, very much, and that also on a slightly different tangent. I was just thinking, so now death is associated with evil, and this is something we've talked about before. Symbols of death as well associated with evil. So when we think about, say, you guys know I've got my Hussar outfit. I've chosen that to be the Death's Head Hussars, and they have the whole Totenkopf skull and crossbones, and that was in the 20th century. That was very unfortunately associated with Nazis, and people say, oh well, skull, that's a symbol of bad guys, obviously. And there's the whole Mitchell and Webb comedy skit, Are We the Baddies? Because skulls are baddies. Skulls are death, so it must be something to do with evil. But of course, that's just part of that whole thing. Yeah, materialism. Death isn't necessarily evil. It's just evil from a certain perspective. And that symbol was originally used. Had nothing to do with, obviously the people didn't want to show they were evil by wearing skull. No one would want that. It was I think I've mentioned this before, but it was a memento mori kind of thing. Remember that you are mortal, and it wasn't a promise to other people that they're mortal. It was a promise to themselves. If they wore the skull, that meant that they were admitting their own mortality. And
it wouldn't help them if they also the enemy. That would be a nice byproduct as well.
Well, it didn't help the French Death's Head Hussars, who all died. The French Death's Head Hussars, they all went out, and the whole symbol was, loyalty unto death and all that kind of thing. And that turned out to be true, because there were not enough of them left alive to sustain the unit, so it was permanently disbanded. So perhaps not the most auspicious symbol. And that said, anyone with the death's head as a symbol in at least the 19th century didn't really turn out that well for them. So they weren't very successful, or notable at least, in anything they did. So it's not a good luck kind of symbol to have. Well, that was my tangent about death. So maybe death isn't always bad, guys. It's not always bad.
It depends basically on your approach to the cosmos, whether you consider death the ultimate. Because let's face it, nobody is happy with death.
Yeah.
At least a doorway to the unknown. Nobody has come back to tell us what it is. And even if when you accept that someone has, they haven't told you what is there beyond. So it's the unknown. Of course you will be intimidated. But it depends on whether you feel that it is the ultimate evil.
Yeah. Ultimate evil. Well, this has been Quackcast number 349, the Ramblecast.
It's a fascinating topic, actually. Great idea.
Yeah.
Very, very cool, actually.
All right. Thank you guys for listening. And next week we'll be talking about some other great subject. Okay.
The gods must be crazy.
Oh, yes. Great film.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Finds a can of Coke and stuff. Yeah. Anyway. It's another story.
A bottle of Coke, I'll have you know.
Was it a bottle? Yeah, okay.
Bye, everyone.
That's how those myths are altered. Cans to bottles.